John is a battle-hardened veteran who served multiple tours overseas. He's a man marked by the brutal realities of war, a person who's seen things that have left deep scars, both physically and emotionally. His PTSD has made it nearly impossible for him to reconnect with his family after returning from deployment. Although he loves his wife and children, his mind is often elsewhere, plagued by flashbacks, nightmares, and a lingering sense of guilt for his absence. Before his time in the military, John and Eleanor were inseparable, a perfect couple in the eyes of their friends and family. They shared a passionate love, and John was once deeply committed to both his career and his family. However, the war changed him. When he returned from his deployments, he was emotionally unavailable, distant, and often angry. The connection he had with Eleanor slowly crumbled as his emotional detachment grew, and he became more isolated, spending long hours in his study, grappling with his memories and fears. Eleanor, once deeply in love with John, is now caught between guilt, loneliness, and a sense of emotional neglect. Before John's deployment, she was a supportive and loving wife. But when John returned, he was a shell of the man she once knew, withdrawn, quick to anger, and unable to engage emotionally. She tried, but after years of trying to reach him, she found herself drifting. As John's emotional coldness deepened, Eleanor found solace in the arms of someone else, Mark, a co-worker who showed her the attention and understanding that John no longer could. Though Eleanor doesn't set out to hurt John, she is desperate to fill the emotional void in her life. The affair with Mark is not just physical but emotional, a way for her to cope with the absence of her husband. She loves John but feels abandoned by him, and over time, she justifies her affair as a way of surviving emotionally in a marriage that feels more like a prison. Before we continue, kindly like and subscribe to stay updated with the journey from wherever you're watching. The children, Lily 7 years, Ben 9 years and Emma 5 years, feel the strain of their parents' fractured relationship. Lily, the eldest, is more aware of the tension between her parents but doesn't fully understand what's happening. Ben, the middle child, often seeks his father's attention but is met with John's emotional distance. Emma, the youngest, is too young to understand but senses the emotional tension in the household. John had always believed in the strength of his family. After years of deployment, countless sleepless nights, and a chest full of medals, he thought coming home would be the end of the war. But as he stepped into his suburban house, the faint hum of normalcy did little to quiet the unease in his chest. His wife, Eleanor, met him at the door with a smile that felt more rehearsed than real. Their 3 children, Lily, Ben, and Emma, cheered at his return, but even their joy couldn't mask the subtle changes in the home. Eleanor, once the glue that held the family together, had grown distant. Her laugh didn't linger as it once did. Her phone, always at her side, lit up constantly, and she was quick to glance at it, quick to tuck it away. The house felt the same, but something beneath the surface had shifted. John's instincts, sharpened by years of service, told him to stay alert, to watch closely. As the children settled into their nightly routine and Eleanor disappeared into their bedroom, John found himself pacing in his home office. It was a converted spare room where he once spent hours planning family vacations, researching schools, dreaming of a life after the military. Tonight, it felt cold and hollow. His gaze fell on the small security monitor, its red light blinking steadily. Without fully understanding why, he clicked through the footage from the past few weeks, his absence recorded in minute detail. What he saw confirmed what his gut had been telling him: something was very, very wrong. Eleanor's behavior becomes harder to ignore. At first, John tries to convince himself that it's just a phase, that things will settle down once he's home long enough, but the distance between them grows with each passing day. She spends more time on her phone, her attention always diverted, and it's not just at work or with friends anymore. She checks her messages constantly, even when they are sitting together at the table, and whenever she catches him watching, she quickly hides the screen, as if trying to protect something from his gaze. The late nights are the worst. She claims it's work, but John knows better. He's watched her leave the house too many times, in that same hurried way, with the same vague excuses. It's becoming a pattern, one that feels less innocent the more it repeats. He doesn't question her immediately, doesn't demand answers. But he feels something shift inside him, a quiet alarm that keeps getting louder, yet he can't tell if it's his mind playing tricks on him or if he's seeing the truth. One night, as they sit in the living room, John watches her from across the room, his gaze lingering as she taps away at her phone. Her smile is forced when she notices him looking, but it doesn't reach her eyes. He opens his mouth to speak but finds himself holding back. What's the point of asking? What can he even say? I'm just adjusting, she says one evening, almost as if rehearsing it. Things will get back to normal soon. Normal. The word stings in a way he doesn't fully understand. What's normal? What was normal before he left? He knows he hasn't been the same since returning from deployment. His mind is clouded by the ghosts of the past, and he's still fighting to find his place here, with her, with their kids. But what about her? What about the distance he can feel but doesn't know how to reach across? It's a conversation they haven't had. The one where she admits she's been pulling away. He hasn't asked the questions he's afraid to hear the answers to. He doesn't know if he's afraid of the truth, or if he's afraid of what happens when you face something that's been broken for too long. He tries to ignore it, bury it deep where he can't feel it. But one evening, after she leaves again, he finds her phone left carelessly on the kitchen counter. It's unlocked, the screen glowing with a fresh notification from someone named Mark. John hesitates, his heart pounding in his chest as his hand reaches for it, despite knowing it's wrong to snoop. But he can't stop himself. He skims through the messages quickly, his eyes scanning words he never thought he'd read. Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed you, one text after another, the tone too familiar, too intimate, the kind of messages he hasn't received from her in a long time. His breath catches in his throat as his stomach drops. He wants to put the phone down, to walk away, but his mind won't let him. The words burn into his memory as he feels the weight of something breaking inside him. It's Mark. A coworker she's never mentioned before. He doesn't want to believe it, can't bring himself to think what this means. He tells himself it's harmless, that it's just friendly banter. But the more he thinks about it, the more unsettled he becomes. It's not just the texts, it's everything. The way she's been acting. The way she's been avoiding him. He's been feeling like a stranger in his own home, like she's been slipping away, and now, this is the proof. The phone feels heavy in his hand. He doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't even know what to say to her when she comes back. He tells himself he'll talk to her when she gets home, that he'll confront her. But the words don't come. He doesn't even know where to begin, and something inside him tells him that whatever happens next, nothing will be the same. John stands in the living room, his gaze lost in the photos of their past. They are reminders of a life before the distance, before the strain of the years weighed on him. A life before he became someone he barely recognizes. His mind drifts to the man he once was, the one who could laugh freely with Eliana, the one who felt whole, alive. But now, the reflection in the glass seems like a shadow of someone he used to know. He barely knows how to reach for that man anymore. The laughter of his children filters through the walls from the other room, but it's distant to him, too far away to touch. He listens, but it's as if the sound is muffled, distorted by the disconnection that has quietly crept in. It's their voices, but the warmth is gone. They sound like echoes of a time when he could be present, but now, they only serve as a painful reminder of his absence, even when he's physically here. His thoughts pull him toward his relationship with Eliana. She's just out of sight, in the kitchen, her movements robotic, habitual. The woman he thought he knew is fading, and the silence between them speaks volumes. They've both changed, but the hardest part is knowing that the gap between them is widening. He wants to blame the war, his service, his PTSD. It's an easy excuse, but deep down, he knows he's been holding onto it for too long. It's not just the war. It's everything, the way he's let her slip through his fingers, how he's allowed the years to pile up between them, unresolved. Then, he hears Emma's voice. Why don't you smile anymore, Daddy? The question stabs at him, sinking deeper than anything else. How is he supposed to explain this? How is he supposed to answer her when he can't even explain it to himself? His chest tightens, and for a moment he simply stands there, frozen, as the guilt overwhelms him. The weight of his failure as a father, as a husband, presses down hard. He wants to make her laugh again. He wants to tell her that everything's okay. But how can he, when he can't even make himself believe it? "I'm just tired, sweetie," he manages, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. She smiles, but it's a small, understanding smile. She doesn't know what's wrong, but she knows enough to see that her father isn't the same. As she skips off, John sinks into the couch, his gaze falling to the floor. The emptiness inside him isn't new, but it's growing. He's been a ghost in his own home for too long. And the hardest part? The hardest part is that Eleanor, the woman he vowed to share everything with, has become as distant as he is. He watches her from across the room, still silently stacking dishes. She's here, but she's not. He's here, but he's not. The space between them feels infinite. "I came back," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I feel like I'm not the man you married anymore." She pauses, her back to him, and the air between them thickens. It's the kind of silence that speaks louder than anything they could say. When she finally turns to face him, it's like she's bracing for something. She looks at him, but her eyes shift away almost immediately. "Things change, John," she says, her tone distant. "You've been gone for a long time." And there it is, the truth of it. She's not the same, but neither is he. They've been coexisting in the same space without really living together. Her words settle heavily in the room, more of a resignation than an answer. There's no fight left in her, no attempt to bridge the gap. It's as if they've both stopped trying to fix what's been broken for so long. The silence stretches, thickening with each passing second. John can't bring himself to say more. There's nothing left to say. He's tried. She's tried. But their attempts to reconnect have only shown them how far apart they truly are. And in this moment, he knows that the distance isn't just about him being absent. It's about them both choosing to let it happen, day by day, in the quiet corners of their lives. As Eleanor moves away, back to the kitchen, John watches her go, the weight of his own isolation sinking deeper into him. He wishes he could reach out, but the gap feels insurmountable. The man he used to be, the father and husband he wanted to be, is slipping further away, and he doesn't know how to stop it. From down the hall, he hears Emma's laughter again, but this time, it feels even more distant. The weight of his absence is suffocating, and as he listens to the sounds of his children, his heart sinks. He's lost them. All of them. He's here, but he's lost. The hours drag on after John's discovery. He's left standing in the doorway, phone in hand, his mind churning. The truth has settled into him like a weight, heavy and suffocating, but the more he thinks about it, the less clear things become. It's as if the ground beneath him has shifted, and he can't find solid footing. The house feels too quiet, too still. Eleanor's absence fills the space more than her presence ever did. He sits on the edge of their bed, the phone still warm from where he last held it. The messages from Mark replay in his mind like an incessant loop, but they don't make sense. He can't piece it together. Is this some twisted misunderstanding? Or has he been blind all along? He tries to tell himself that he's just being paranoid, that it's a momentary lapse in judgment. But the evidence stares back at him, unrelenting. His thoughts are fragmented, each one battling the other, confusion of anger, betrayal, and sorrow. "Maybe I'm overthinking this," he whispers to himself, but even as he says it, he knows he's not. He tries to convince himself that maybe it's nothing, that the texts are harmless, just a moment of weakness, but it's a lie. It doesn't add up. Not anymore. Every piece of evidence leads him to the same painful conclusion. His mind drifts back to that night at the cafe, watching Eleanor and Mark from a distance. The way they were so comfortable, so close, it burned into him, an image he can't erase. Eleanor had laughed in a way that felt too natural, too at ease. And Mark, his presence, his attention, it was like a beacon. John's heart sinks deeper into his chest with the realization that something had been going on long before he ever noticed. The life he thought he had is unraveling before him, thread by thread, and he can't stop it. The next few days feel like they're crawling by, each one heavier than the last. John avoids Eliana when she's home, not because he wants to, he's never been more desperate to say something, anything, but because he's paralyzed by the weight of it all. His every thought is consumed by her absence, and when she's around, it's only more painful. The distance between them has never been so stark. His emotions are a blur. The anger rises in waves, but it's not just anger, it's something deeper. The sadness that has gripped him, that sense of not being enough, not being there for her, is now mingled with the suffocating sting of betrayal. His own guilt doesn't ease the pain, it only amplifies it. His hands tremble whenever he looks at her, and the quiet between them feels so thick he can hardly breathe. One night, he can't stand it any longer. He can't keep pretending he doesn't know. He can't let the silence stretch on while his mind is unraveling. He needs to know everything. He waits until Eliana is getting ready to leave. It's a habit now, the nights out, the meetings with friends, that always seem to take longer than expected. She doesn't ask why he's staring at her when she grabs her coat. The question is there, but it's never voiced. "Where are you going?" he asks, his voice quiet, almost too quiet. "I told you," she replies, distracted, her hand on the doorknob, "I'm meeting some friends." John watches her, his gaze steady, but there's a storm brewing in his chest. He's been here before, standing on the edge of something, not sure whether to take the leap or stay frozen in place. But tonight, the uncertainty is gone. He knows what he has to do. He follows her. He doesn't know why he's doing it, but he can't stop. The curiosity pulls him forward like a magnet, each step feeling like a surrender. He knows it's a mistake. He knows he's only digging the hole deeper. But the impulse is too strong. He gets into his car, follows her through the streets, each turn she takes sinking him deeper into the chaos inside his mind. When she parks outside the same cafe, his stomach twists. He can feel it now, the certainty of what's coming, but it doesn't make it easier. He parks at a distance, not wanting to be seen, but the dread builds with every second. His breath is shallow as he watches her go inside, the door swinging open to reveal Mark already waiting. The sight of them together stings more than he anticipated. They stand close. Too close. He can't hear what they are saying, but their body language says enough. Eliana touches his arm in a way that John hasn't seen in years, casual, intimate. It's a quiet betrayal, played out in broad daylight, and John feels something snap inside him. The disbelief, the rage, everything floods him at once, overwhelming him, drowning him. "I can't ignore it anymore," he whispers to himself, the words barely audible over the roar in his chest. "I have to know the truth." The scene ends with John watching, helpless and broken, as Eliana and Mark share a moment that feels too private, too familiar. He doesn't know what comes next, whether he'll confront her, or if this is the beginning of something darker, something he doesn't know how to stop. But as he sits there, feeling the weight of everything crashing down around him, one thing is clear, his world, and the life he thought he understood, is irreparably shattered. John stands there, the gun shaking in his hand. Eliana's eyes are wide with terror, her breath shallow, trying to piece together an explanation she knows will never be enough. But John isn't listening anymore. All the words, all the hurt, everything he's tried to suppress inside for years, crashes into him at once. The gun feels heavy, but it's the only thing in his hand that feels real anymore. Everything else, the home, the family, the love, feels distant, slipping through his fingers. His vision narrows, his heart hammering in his chest. "I tried," John says again, voice low but rising with anger. "I tried to protect us, tried to fix everything. But you ruined it all." Eliana steps forward, trembling, her voice breaking. "John, please. I never meant for this to happen." Her voice doesn't reach him. The years of being emotionally absent, of never truly being there for her, it all swells up inside him, and something snaps. The pain, the betrayal, the guilt, it all erupts. In that moment, his mind isn't working. It's pure, chaotic emotion, pushing him forward. Before Eliana can take another step, he raises the gun. The world slows down for a moment, his breath, his heartbeat, the ache in his chest. Then, without warning, the sharp sound of the gunshot pierces the silence. Eliana's body jerks, the force of the bullet knocking her to the ground, lifeless. Her face is still, eyes open, but there's no recognition in them anymore. She's gone. Just like that. John's breath is ragged as he stares at her, unable to fully comprehend the action, unable to fully process what he's just done. He stands frozen, the weight of the gun now seeming like it's part of him. But then, movement at the door catches his eye. Mark. He's there. The shock on Mark's face is immediate, his hands raised as if to say something, but John doesn't hear him. The world narrows again. There's only Mark now, standing there, the man who has shattered everything John thought he knew. Mark tries to back away, his words stumbling out in panic. "John, what are you doing?" John's mind spins, anger and grief flooding him once again. This isn't just about Eliana. It's about everything. The lies, the years of isolation, the way he's been broken and never given a chance to heal. His hands, shaking uncontrollably, raise the gun again. Mark takes another step back, but it's too late. Before he can react, John pulls the trigger again, the gunshot a deafening crack that cuts through the room. Mark's body crumples, falling to the floor with a sickening thud. For a moment, time stops. John stands there, staring at the lifeless forms of the two people who have torn his world apart. The weight of what he's done settles heavily in his chest, suffocating him. His legs give way, and he sinks to the floor, the gun slipping from his hand. His world is shattered. His mind isn't working anymore. He's lost everything, and the silence in the room is unbearable, the echo of the gunshots still ringing in his ears. The flashing lights outside cut through the darkness, their reflection splashing across the walls. John doesn't move as the officers pour in. His eyes are fixed on Eliana and Mark's lifeless bodies. His chest tightens with every breath, but he can't seem to shake the heavy numbness that has settled over him. The weight of the gun in his hand is a reminder that there's no going back. He doesn't react when the officers surround him. They shout commands, but the words don't make sense. His mind is still caught in a haze. The cold press of reality is beginning to settle in, but it's distant, as though it's happening to someone else. When the officers reach him, one of them takes hold of his arms. "John, you need to come with us," they say, their tone clipped, but steady. John doesn't respond. The gun slips from his hand, falling to the floor with a muted thud. It's the last thing he remembers holding onto, the last thing that made sense in the chaos. He is detached, floating in the aftermath of his own destruction. The flashing lights fade as the interrogation room door clicks shut behind him. John sits at the table, his hands folded in front of him, his gaze never leaving the surface of the cold metal. He doesn't feel anything now. He feels too far gone. There's nothing left to salvage, and the finality of it all has yet to fully register. Minutes pass. Then the door opens again, and a detective steps in. He's middle-aged, calm, with a quiet authority that contrasts with the tension hanging in the air. He places a folder on the table, watching John closely. John doesn't look at it. He doesn't even look at the detective. He's too tired, too empty to care. The detective settles into his chair across from him, his eyes scanning John's face. "John, we know what happened. We need you to tell us what led to this." His voice is measured, professional, but there's a weight to it, as if he knows the devastation this conversation is about to dredge up. John doesn't answer right away. He stares at the table, his mind replaying the events, Eliana's face, Mark's panic, the final pull of the trigger. Each shot reverberates through his mind like a cruel echo. He was the one who pulled the trigger. It was him, not the pain, not the betrayal, but the man he's become. Finally, his voice comes out in a broken rasp. I didn't know what to do. He doesn't raise his eyes. I lost everything, she broke me. The detective watches him, waiting, letting the words sink in before speaking again. We found the texts, John. We found the phone, and it's clear this wasn't just an impulse. You followed her. You knew what was going on. John nods, the shame of it all weighing on him. He can't deny it. He knew. Somewhere inside, he always knew, but he had hoped, no, prayed, that he was just being paranoid, that it was something he could fix on his own. But now, all he can feel is the jagged emptiness that follows, the aftermath of a choice he made in an instant. I thought maybe it was just me, John whispers, his voice hoarse, and the words fall from his lips as if they are not even his own. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But then I saw them together. The detective nods slowly, his expression softening just a bit. And when you saw that, when you followed her, when you saw them together, what did you think would happen, John? John's head drops, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. I didn't think. I couldn't think. His voice trembles as the flood of emotion rises again. I just wanted to fix it. To fix us. I couldn't, she was slipping away, and I was losing everything, and I couldn't stop it. The detective leans back, his eyes never leaving John. So you took matters into your own hands. John doesn't answer, but the guilt is written all over his face. His eyes flicker to the folder, to the evidence of his actions, texts, phone records, the gun registered in his name, all pointing to the fact that this wasn't some act of blind rage. It was calculated, born from years of unresolved pain, of feeling unseen and discarded. And in that moment, the world became too much for him to hold. The detective sits for a long moment in silence, studying John, the weight of the conversation settling between them. This wasn't just an act of revenge, the detective says quietly. This was the result of everything building up. You were broken, John. But that doesn't excuse what happened. John's gaze moves slowly to the corner of the room, as if the shadows could somehow hide him from the weight of his own actions. The words of the judge, the sentencing, the legal jargon, none of it feels real. He's no longer present in this world. His body is here, shackled, dragged through motions, but his soul is somewhere else, lost in the weight of what he's done. 15 years. A lifetime, he thinks, but it feels like a lifetime he should never have been allowed to have. He doesn't know how to reconcile this sentence with the actions that led to it, the irreversible act he committed, the life he took, the lives he ruined. He's dimly aware of the rustling of paper, the shifting in the crowd, but none of it registers. He hears the muffled sobs from the back of the room, but he doesn't turn to look. He doesn't know how to face them. How do you look at the people whose lives you've destroyed? How do you stand there and take what they have to say? The gavel strikes, its finality resonating through the room. John doesn't even flinch. His fate has been sealed. As he's escorted away, his eyes scan the room one last time, landing on the empty chair where Eleanor should have been. The woman who once held his heart, the one who once stood beside him, her absence fills the space like a void, and he realizes just how much of her is gone. Just how much of him is gone. The prison gates loom ahead, a sharp, cruel contrast to the world outside. As the transport van rolls to a stop, John feels something cold settle in his chest. There is no comfort here. There is no freedom. The gates open, and the guards file him out, briskly and without ceremony. His eyes trace the concrete, the wire fences that hold him inside this place of nothingness. He is led into a stark, white-lit holding cell. The door clangs shut behind him, and John's legs nearly give out under him. He doesn't know what he's waiting for, an explanation, an apology, maybe even an explanation from himself, but there is nothing. The cell is bare, empty except for the cot in the corner, and the silence weighs down on him. The life he once knew has been stripped from him. All that's left now is the endless stretch of days, each one bleeding into the next. Time here is different, slower, as if it stretches forever. His mind reels as he sinks to the cot, staring up at the blank walls. His thoughts wander, not sure where to go, not sure how to make sense of the wreckage he's created. What have I done? How did it come to this? The words echo in his mind. They are a question without an answer, a question he has no right to ask. He thought he was fighting for something, for a future with Eliana, for a family that could be whole again. But instead, he destroyed it all. The faces of Eliana and Mark linger in his thoughts, not with anger, but with a kind of tragic understanding. They were both caught in something they couldn't escape, just like him. But they didn't deserve this. Prison life is quiet, almost suffocating in its monotony. There is no distraction from the heavy weight of regret, no escape from the reality of his actions. John finds himself reliving that night over and over, each time seeing the gun in his hand, hearing the shots, watching them fall. The guilt gnaws at him, but it's too late. He can't take it back. He can't undo it. There's nothing left but time. The days blur together. His routine is simple: meals in a crowded cafeteria, the clink of the bars when they close at night, the distant shouts of other prisoners. He keeps to himself, avoids eye contact, speaks only when spoken to. The weight of his crime is too much to bear, and the silence between him and everyone else feels safer. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. He doesn't expect it. The truth is, he doesn't know if he can forgive himself. The hardest part is the loneliness. Not the physical isolation, he expected that. But the emptiness that stretches out inside him, a deep ache that nothing seems to fill. He thought he could fix things, fix himself, but all he did was break everything. And now, he is left to live in the aftermath, to count the years, each one a reminder of what he lost. The chance to rebuild, to make things right, is gone. And in its place is a hollow space where a future used to be. Thank you for following along with this intense and emotional journey. If you've enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with the next chapters. Your support means the world and helps keep this narrative alive. Stay tuned for more as we continue to explore the depths of these characters and their struggles.